The woman in the ivory blazer laughed at the judge. Not scoffed, not muttered, not rolled her eyes. She actually laughed, sharp and nasal and full of contempt, as if the seal on the courtroom wall, the flag in the corner, the bailiff by the door, the trembling victim in the front row, all of it were a joke staged for her private amusement. Then she planted both manicured hands on the defense table and announced, loud enough to crack the air, "This court has no authority over a living sovereign woman." A gasp moved through the gallery. A deputy took one step forward. The court reporter stopped typing for half a heartbeat. And the judge, who had seen murderers break, con men beg, and career criminals fake remorse with Oscar worthy tears, went absolutely still. Everyone in that room felt it. Something extraordinary was about to happen. She called herself a sovereign citizen. Her real name was Vanessa Kincaid, though she refused to answer to it. 46 years old, diamond earrings, lacquered blonde hair swept into a perfect shell, cream blouse buttoned to the throat, every inch of her polished and expensive and furious. She had the posture of a woman who had spent years weaponizing indignation, chin lifted, shoulders squared, lips curled like the world itself had offended her by existing. Even seated, she radiated the kind of entitlement that made other people shrink without understanding why. But not everyone in that room was shrinking anymore. If you've ever wanted to see arrogance meet a wall it couldn't buy, bully or outtalk, stay with this one, and tell me in the comments if you've ever seen someone so convinced the rules didn't apply to them. Because before this hearing was over, that illusion was going to be torn out by the roots. Across from Vanessa sat the woman she had spent months trying to erase. Elena Ruiz wore a plain gray cardigan over a blue dress faded from too many washes. She held her hands together so tightly the knuckles blanched white, but her back remained straight. That was what hit people first about Elena. She looked fragile until you noticed the dignity. 32, a public school office clerk, mother of a 9-year-old boy, caregiver to her diabetic mother, and the kind of person who apologized when others stepped on her foot. The bruise on her cheek had long since turned yellow and disappeared, but the small ridge under her left eyebrow remained, a raised silver line catching the sterile courtroom light. She had come here by city bus, missing half a day's pay. Vanessa had arrived in an imported SUV with invalid paper plates and a printed packet titled Notice of Foreign Jurisdictional Challenge. The case on the surface sounded absurdly ordinary. Roadside stop, unregistered vehicle, refusal to provide a license, disorderly conduct, resisting arrest. But that was only the shell of it. Underneath, there was a frightened school employee, a parking lot confrontation, a shove to concrete, threats caught on a phone camera, and a trail of pseudo-legal harassment that stretched far beyond one bad afternoon. Judge Adrian Weller presided over Department 7, and in that county his name carried a strange mixture of fear and relief. He was a tall man in his early 70s with a long, lined face and a voice so quiet it forced everyone else to become quieter too. He did not posture. He did not thunder. He didn't need to. He had the cold patience of a surgeon and the memory of a vault. Lawyers said he could tell when a person was lying not because of what they said, but because of what they needed the room to believe about them. Under the old brass lamps and the washed-out daylight bleeding through high windows, he adjusted his glasses and studied Vanessa like an archaeologist examining a fraud. Vanessa refused to stand when addressed. She refused to state her name. She refused counsel but interrupted everyone. She insisted she was traveling, not driving. She said her vehicle was private conveyance beyond statutory reach. She called the prosecutor a corporate fiction mouthpiece and the bailiff an armed revenue collector. A low murmur rippled through the benches each time she spoke. Some people looked annoyed, others looked fascinated, but Elena looked sick, not because of the nonsense itself, because she had heard it all before. That's when everything changed. The prosecutor, a compact woman named Dana Mercer, with a clipped voice and eyes sharpened by years of nonsense, asked permission to move beyond the citation issues and address the underlying conduct. Judge Weller nodded. Dana turned to Elena and asked one simple question. How did this begin? Elena swallowed. Her voice was soft at first, almost too soft to carry. She explained that Vanessa had shown up at the elementary school pickup lane 3 weeks earlier with fake diplomatic style tags and demanded front access despite not being on the authorized list. When Elena politely told her school policy required identification and a valid pickup authorization, Vanessa smiled in a way Elena would never forget and said, "I don't answer to clerks." The first day ended in yelling, the second in threats, the third in paper documents mailed to Elena's apartment claiming a $6 million lien against her for interference with sovereign movement. The courtroom shifted, heads lifted, pens moved faster. Dana introduced the letters, thick stacks of them, gold seals bought online, red thumbprints, dense pages filled with gibberish law and personal details that made people in the gallery whisper when they realized Vanessa had obtained Elena's home address, her mother's name, even her son's school schedule. Then came the phone messages, played through the courtroom speakers. Vanessa's voice oozed through the room, smug and venomous. "You don't tell me what to do. If I decide your little life stops working, it stops working. Learn your place." The courtroom went silent. Vanessa leaned back, unfazed, one ankle crossing over the other. "Context," she said with a dismissive flick of her fingers. "They always play things without context." Judge Weller looked at her once. "Ms. Kincaid, you will speak when I ask you to." Her smile hardened. "That is not my status." No one moved. The tension was now physical, like static under the skin. Then Dana called the school security officer, a broad-shouldered veteran named Marcus Bell, who testified that on the day of the arrest, Vanessa had bypassed the pickup barricade entirely and driven onto the curb. Children were present. Teachers were present. Elena stepped forward to block the front entrance and ask her to stop. Vanessa got out, got in Elena's face, and said words Marcus repeated carefully, because even he seemed embarrassed to say them in open court. She told Ms. Ruiz, "You people only get authority when decent citizens let you borrow it." The room reacted instantly, a hiss of shock, a muttered wow. Elena closed her eyes for a second. Marcus then described Vanessa shoving Elena so hard she fell backward onto the pavement, striking her head on the edge of a planter. Blood, screaming children. A teacher calling 911. Vanessa standing over her and declaring, "This is what happens when servants forget themselves." The footage from the school entrance camera came next, and it was worse than testimony. Grainy, yes, but clear enough. Elena stepping back with both palms visible, Vanessa lunging forward, the impact, Elena crumpling sideways, the terrible split-second stillness after. The courtroom went dead silent. For the first time all morning, Vanessa's expression flickered. Not remorse, annoyance. The annoyance of someone forced to see her own ugliness in public. Her strategy changed. You could watch it happen in real time. The arrogance sharpened into attack. She rose without permission and pointed at Elena. "That woman is performing victimhood because she knows how your system works. Tears, poverty, and a sad little cardigan. That's all it takes for bureaucrats to worship." Even the deputies looked stunned by the cruelty of it. Elena did not cry. She sat there with her hands still clasped, breathing slowly, and somehow that made Vanessa look even smaller. Judge Weller's voice came low and flat. "Sit down." Vanessa didn't. "I do not consent," she snapped. "You are an administrator of maritime fraud." A few people in the gallery let out involuntary half-laughs of disbelief, but they died immediately when the judge's face changed. He did not slam a gavel. He didn't have to. He simply leaned forward, and when he spoke, the whole room seemed to contract around his words. "Bailiff," he said, "one more refusal, and this defendant will learn that gravity recognizes no sovereign exceptions." That line hit the room like a live wire. Somebody in the back whispered, "Damn." Vanessa kept going. That was her fatal flaw. She had spent so long mistaking indulgence for power that she no longer recognized warning when it was spoken plainly. She began reciting from a crumpled packet about admiralty law, flesh and blood persons, strawman identities, secret treason. Judge Weller let her speak for just long enough to reveal the total emptiness of it, then asked the prosecutor if she had anything further. Dana did. Cell phone extraction, search history, purchase records. Vanessa had bought fake sovereign citizen templates online. She had downloaded how to place a private lien on public employees. She had searched Elena's address 2 days before the assault. She had printed citizen arrest forms. More than that, records showed this was not her first time. Two parking enforcement officers, one librarian, and a former HOA treasurer had each received similar harassment packets after crossing her. One had moved, another had filed a restraining order. Suddenly, the case was no longer about one unhinged outburst. It was a pattern, a method, a woman who used ideology as camouflage for intimidation. That's when everything changed again. Dana called an unexpected witness, Vanessa's estranged sister, Claire. She was plainly dressed, hands shaking, voice raw with the exhaustion of someone who had carried family shame too long. Claire testified that Vanessa had fallen deep into sovereign citizen forums after a divorce and began treating every inconvenience as persecution. Bills were war, school policies were kidnapping statutes, traffic laws were commercial extortion. But behind the rhetoric, Claire said, nothing had really changed. Vanessa still believed what she always believed, that rules were for ordinary people, that if she was loud enough, cruel enough, relentless enough, others would back down. Vanessa exploded. She called her sister a traitor, a thief, a drug addict. None of it was true. Claire stared straight ahead and took it. The courtroom watched the whole mask peel off in strips. Finally, Judge Weller addressed Vanessa directly. This is your moment, Ms. Kincaid. You may sit quietly and allow these proceedings to continue, or you may continue sabotaging yourself. Vanessa stood, smiling with all the wrong teeth. You old man, you can cosplay authority all day. I do not bow to rented robes. A woman in the gallery audibly gasped. The prosecutor's pen stopped. Elena looked down, and the courtroom went silent in that deep, almost sacred way. Silence only happens when everyone knows a line has just been crossed that cannot be uncrossed. Judge Weller removed his glasses and placed them carefully on the bench. Bailiff, he said, remove her. Vanessa laughed at first because she thought the room still belonged to her. Then the deputy took her wrist. The second deputy took her other arm. Her chair scraped violently against the floor. Her heels skidded. Papers flew. She shrieked about kidnapping, treason, genocide, unlawful touching. She twisted hard enough that a strand of hair came loose across her face. The polished image cracked in seconds. The gallery recoiled as she was dragged toward the side door, still screaming, "None of this is real. None of you are real. He can't judge me. He can't." The door closed behind her. And in the sudden stillness that followed, Judge Weller said, almost gently, "Reality has entered an objection." The line moved through the room like thunder swallowed whole. Vanessa was later returned, restrained, quieter now, face blotched, the fury replaced by the first visible signs of collapse. And that was when Judge Weller delivered the monologue no one in that courtroom would ever forget. "Ms. Kincaid," he said, "courts do not derive legitimacy from your consent. Children do not become safer because you invent language. Public servants do not become less human because you call them fiction. What you have practiced here is not liberty. It is vanity armed with jargon. You assaulted a woman doing her job, frightened children, stalked a family, forged documents, and then wrapped your cruelty in counterfeit philosophy because you mistook defiance for intelligence. But the law is not confused by costume. It sees conduct. And your conduct is the conduct of a bully." He paused, and the pause was devastating. "You wanted to humiliate a woman you thought no one would protect. Instead, you revealed yourself in a room built to remember." Vanessa's lower lip trembled. She looked suddenly, desperately human, but not in a way that invited mercy, in a way that made the emptiness inside her impossible to ignore. Judge Weller found her in contempt, upheld the charges for assault, harassment, resisting lawful arrest, document fraud, and child endangerment stemming from her reckless vehicle incursion at the school entrance. He imposed jail time, not symbolic time, real time. He issued a full protective order shielding Elena and her family, referred the fraudulent lien filings for additional criminal review, barred Vanessa from school property permanently, and ordered mandatory psychiatric evaluation as part of supervised release conditions. Then he looked at Elena. Ms. Ruiz, he said, the court cannot give you back the piece she stole, but it can say, publicly and permanently, that you were right to stand your ground. Elena's face crumpled then, not from weakness, but from relief so sudden it almost looked like pain. She covered her mouth. A tear slipped free. In the gallery, a teacher from her school began crying too. Months later, the ripple effects kept spreading. The district tightened security. Staff who had quietly endured sovereign paper harassment came forward. Other pending complaints against Vanessa were reopened. Elena received community support, paid off overdue medical bills, and eventually returned to work to a hallway lined with handmade thank you cards from children who remembered the day she stood between chaos and a school entrance. Her son stopped asking if the bad lady knew where they lived. He started sleeping through the night again, and Vanessa, who walked into court believing she could nullify reality with volume, left in handcuffs and silence. If that ending felt like justice, say it. If you believe decency deserves protection and cruelty deserves consequences, leave your thoughts in the comments, like this story, subscribe for more courtroom justice, and share it with someone who still thinks arrogance is power. Because sometimes the most unforgettable moment in court is not when a liar speaks, it's when the room finally stops listening.